Hi, Charles SirBookSage here. Do you sit down at the beginning of the year and consciously pick, like, this book is going to start my reading year for 2023 or whatever year? Or if you're a movie watcher or anime reader or manga or whatever, do you, like, stop and say, this is going to begin my story year? When I was growing up as an avid reader, the time of year really never meant anything to me, outside of obviously going to school and everything. But what I was reading for pleasure, the time of year was irrelevant. The only time the calendar year intruded in any way at all is when it was nearing my birthday or it was nearing Christmas, because that usually meant I was getting books as presents. And there might be a book in there that would jump to the front of my TBR and become the very next thing I read. But outside of that, the calendar year never played any part at all. I'm predominantly a science fiction and fantasy reader, so I'm always, my whole life, I've been in the middle of reading like long series after long series after long series. So my priority was reading through a series, not what time of year it was. But I've noticed since I started this channel, the calendar year has like become a thing. It's like it knocks on your door one day, you open up your door, and here's the calendar. You're strolling in and saying, hey, I'm part of your life now. And it's just, I don't know if it's a byproduct of a sort of booktube-esque channel, because booktube can be a very structured thing. If you just take the booktube template, you know, you have your monthly, your weekly videos, your quarterly videos. So it already has this sort of built-in structure where the calendar year is like inherent and unavoidable. Now, of course, you can just do any type of booktube channel and just ignore all those things and just not follow the normal template, but in general, it's there. And I have a feeling for most YouTubers, no matter what kind of content they create, the calendar year inevitably creeps in, becomes something they can't ignore. It's just something I've been thinking about because I've noticed the last few years that I have done that, where I've said, okay, no matter what series I'm in the middle of, let me pick something to start my reading year off with. And this year, for 2023, I actually did that. I first finished up reading this novel, Danu's Curse, by Nicole Pierman. Some of you may know Nicole. She has a BookTube, AuthorTube channel. She's a self-published author. And Danu's Curse is a sort of fantasy story set in ancient Ireland. So you have things like druids and Tuatha De Danann. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 3.75 stars. I have a review on my channel about the book. I really enjoyed it. This is probably, out of all the things I've read from Nicole so far, I think Danu's Curse is my favorite. And just has a brand new book cover to it too, for those who might have it and have to go and manually update like their Kindle library or something. After I finished reading, like closing out that book from last year, I sat down and decided my first reading book of 2023 had to be something Tolkien related. After the utter abomination that's known as The Rings of Power Season 1, I needed to go and get some proper Tolkien. So I sat down and I reread The Hobbit. Now, I first read The Hobbit when I was in elementary school, and every time I've ever read The Hobbit, it's always been a physical book, up until the very last time I read it. The most recent reread, it was the first time I read it on ebook. So this time I decided, well, I've never listened to an Audible of it. So I picked up the audiobook, and not the Andy Serkis, the newer recordings. The other guy, the other narrator's name slips my mind at the moment. But that other guy who does them, I have the whole Lord of the Rings audiobooks from that other narrator. And shame on me, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I should have written it down. But I really enjoy his readings of Tolkien, and The Hobbit was just as enjoyable to listen to with his narration as The Fellowship, Two Towers, and Return of the King are. One of the things that I really enjoy about rereading Tolkien, revisiting these stories, is each go-around, there's some aspect of it that stands out more than others. So each time there's something that like kind of I just pay more attention to for whatever reason. Every once in a while, I'll notice something that I may not have noticed since like 10 reads ago. But this particular time, and I don't know if it was a byproduct of the audiobook or not, what really stood out to me was the scene where they arrive at Bjorn's house. And for those who may not be aware, because Bjorn, like Tom Bombadil, is often just cut out of adaptations of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. But Bjorn is a shapeshifter who lives by himself in this house near the mountains. I think he's just west of the Misty Mountains, or east of the Misty Mountains, actually. And he hates goblins, he hates orcs, and he hunts them when they come anywhere near his land. And he's very suspicious and very closed off from people. And his friends are animals, because he can transform into a bear. So he communicates with them, and that's more of his people than actual people. Anyway, when they arrive there, Gandalf and Bilbo show up first, and the dwarves are given instructions to just wait a little bit, and one or two come. The next batch, wait another 10 minutes, and then a couple come. So, and this is a tactic that Gandalf uses at the beginning of the novel. He uses this on Bilbo to recruit Bilbo into Thorin Oakenshield's quest to reclaim the treasure in the Lonely Mountain. And what I really liked about this scene here is this time, instead of Bilbo being the target of this sort of tactic, Bilbo is an active, eager participant in doing this to Bjorn, to get Bjorn to pretty much accept the whole group of them. And of course, Gandalf and Bilbo sit down, and Gandalf begins kind of telling Bjorn in little bits and pieces about their adventure so far, but doing it in a way that he sees it piques Bjorn's interest. So when a dwarf or two show up, Bjorn is only temporarily distracted because he's invested in Gandalf's tale. And then eventually Bjorn realizes, okay, just tell however many you got out there, just tell them all to come in. And what I liked about it is just seeing Gandalf reuse a tactic that he knows is successful. But it's a big character moment for Bilbo in the story, because it shows you how far Bilbo's come as a person since the very beginning of the book, when he was timid and terrified and upset and overwhelmed by all these dwarves. And now he's an eager, active participant in not necessarily a ruse for any bad intentions, but a tactic to get Bjorn to accept everybody without him just shutting his doors and turning them away. And I really enjoyed that moment. And again, maybe it's the audiobook that made it stand out more this particular go-round than any other time. I don't know. But I just thought I would mention that. If you've never read The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, I highly suggest it. These are my favorite books of all time, so I am biased. And with that in mind, if you've watched my Rings of Power videos, you'll understand my reaction to that show. And they're not reaction videos, but they're just me talking and discussing the show and the things that they've done in it. But this is not about the Rings of Power. All of this to say, here's what I'm going to be reading this weekend. I am going to be reading through The Fall of Numenor. Now, I'm really curious about this book because this is a compilation of all of Tolkien's various writings on Numenor. Because Tolkien was always writing and adding to and tweaking and changing and trying different versions of all the events throughout the First and Second Age, throughout his life, through the many, many decades. Numenor being one of those. And what they have here is they've taken all his disparate writings about Numenor, and I believe it's all been compiled into one volume. And I'm really curious about this because this is edited by Brian Sibley, and this is his first attempt doing this, because it was always Christopher Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien's son, who compiled each of those books containing Tolkien's writings. There's a 12-book series called The Histories of Middle-earth that deep dives through all of the different ages and everything, and shows you early versions of everything, and really fascinating stuff if you like the craft of writing and the development of story. If that's not your thing, then obviously it's not for you. This, however, if you've never read any of Tolkien's writings on Numenor, and your only experience with Numenor is the aforementioned Rings of Power show, I would highly recommend getting this. Personally, I'd recommend getting the Silmarillion, but if you want to start with just this first to get a feel for the kind of things Tolkien was writing in that, about that, basically, in this case, Numenor's second age of Arda. But I'm going to be going through this. Probably not the whole thing this weekend, but I'm going to start in on this, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. So Numenor is a fascinating tale. It's sort of Tolkien's take on that kind of an Atlantis society, in a sense where it's a group of people, a culture that rises to the heights of existence and culture and accomplishment, and then corrupts from within and falls. Really looking forward to it. And great artwork in here by Alan Lee. Alan Lee is one of the premier Tolkien artists out there. Personally, I'm a Brothers Hildebrandt guy. That's my OG Tolkien paintings. But Alan Lee and a few others are really just high quality artists when it comes to Tolkien. And they each have their own kind of unique presentation. So now let me know in the comments, do you pick a certain thing to start your reading year off, or your story watching year off? Or it's just you just go to whatever's next on your list? Or if you happen to be in the middle of a show or a series, or you just keep going and don't even pay attention to the fact that it's January in that sense. So let me know down below, because it's been something I've been thinking about a lot. And I wonder just how much more having a kind of channel like this has influenced and impacted my reading and my intake of story. I think it's impacted it in positive ways, but it's probably also impacted it in negative ways as well. And just something that's been on my mind.